In this video, I'm going to tell you about the one thing that will grow your SaaS faster than anything else. And that one thing is pricing. Pricing is the biggest lever in your SaaS business. Having invested in more than 150 SaaS companies, I've seen it over and over again that when a founder raises their prices, they see their growth accelerate. And to give you just one recent example of that, take a look at this graph from a tiny seed company that asked to remain anonymous. But he generously offered to share this graph with his revenue growth and a couple milestones in his company, getting into tiny seed and how it accelerated his growth, and then look at that increase after he raised his prices. So in this video, I'm going to talk about why this works, and then I'm going to talk to you about how to think through a price increase and how to raise prices well. But I want to give you one more example of a founder who raised his prices and dramatically accelerated his growth. The company is Gymdesk at gymdesk.com, and the founder is Eran Galperin. I quoted Eran in my book, The SaaS Playbook, about his experience raising his prices for Gymdesk. So Eran had been running Gymdesk for 5 or 6 years. It's gym and fitness studio management software. During that time, he had built it into quite a force that had a significant foothold in the market. And through some encouragement from our Tiny Seed pricing playbook, he decided to raise his prices pretty significantly, in some cases by more than 50%. And often this decision is much more about emotion than it is about flipping the switch. Technically, it's not that hard to raise your prices, but that fear of a backlash from customers that you built a relationship with is really scary. And so Eran raised prices. And I have a quote from him. He said, "Most of our customers responded very well to the price increase. Some of them even wrote back and said, 'Congrats. You deserve a raise.'" In the end, only a few of Gymdesk's more than 600 customers left as a result of the price increase. The company's MRR growth went up by 70%, and its average revenue per customer has continued to climb. With this increase in revenue, Eran was able to really accelerate the growth of the business. So with the graph that I showed you and the story about Gymdesk, I hope I've intrigued you enough to think about pricing and the idea that most of us are underpriced. And if you stick around to the end of this video, I'm going to tell you the mistake I see many timid founders make that renders the rest of the advice I'm about to give you kind of pointless. The fact is, most of us underprice our product. We don't think it's very valuable. We put a few months into coding it, and then we say, well, I think I could charge $20 a month, when in fact, this may be worth $200 a month or $2,000 a month to the right customer. Tiny Seed, I've mentioned it a couple times. It's the startup accelerator that I run. At the beginning of many of our batches, I will ask, who here thinks they are underpriced? And usually, somewhere between 2/3 and 80% of the founders raise their hand. So something that I talk about a lot is increasing pricing. The first thing I want to talk about is, why is it so effective? There's a number of factors that are in play here, but oftentimes, as you raise prices, if you're able to go up market, you will reduce churn, which gives you a healthier business. But even if you don't go up market, when you raise prices, the first order effect is that you make more money. If you raise prices 20%, even if you have some cancellations, you're probably going to make 15+% more per month. If you raise prices 50%, as some folks wind up doing, you dramatically increase the amount of MRR coming in, and you increase your growth at the same time, assuming you aren't pushing your prices too high. There is a point where you can push them too high and start losing market share, but it's very rare that founders get there, and frankly, you'll know it when you see it. If you raise your prices too far, it's going to be pretty obvious pretty quickly, and you will be able to roll that back. So the first order effect of raising prices is you have more money to invest into staff, into marketing, or maybe to pull out into your pocket just to be more profitable. But the second order effect of raising prices is you can invest in so many more marketing approaches the higher your budget. So there's a whole swath of marketing approaches that are unavailable at a $500 annual contract value that become available at $7,000 a year. And so things like cold outreach or doing in-person events or even doing a heavy sales-driven process, they just don't make sense when you're charging $500 or $1,000 or $1,500 a year. So the first order effect is you have more money, but the second order effect is you can feasibly grow your business faster because your palette of marketing approaches that can work become so much more. I often get asked, how often should I consider raising prices? And depending on how fast your market moves, you should revisit your pricing every 6 to 18 months. I'm not saying make changes that often, but at least revisit your pricing compared to your competition and ask yourself, is anyone complaining that we are too expensive? You should be losing a small number of deals to people who say you're too expensive. Otherwise, you're usually underpriced. Now let's talk about how to increase prices. There's a couple really simple ways to do it that many people may not even notice. And then there's the more comprehensive way that we'll talk about in a second about notifying all your customers. But one simple option to increase prices is to decrease the value metric of your plans, but keep the prices the same. So for example, today, if customers get 3,000 subscribers for $49 a month, you can drop that number down to say 2,500 subscribers or 2,000 subscribers for the same price. So the pricing amount stays the same, but people need to upgrade to higher tiers faster. Another option is just to hide your lowest pricing tier on your pricing page. This should be relatively quick, and what you'll likely see is you'll get a few fewer trials or new customers, but more of them will be on the higher price plans. Those are not comprehensive ways of raising prices across the board, but they are simple things that you can test out if you want to dip your toe in the water and start to get comfortable with the idea of raising prices. So now let's dive into what it looks like to raise prices well across the board. You have to make a decision of whether or not you're going to grandfather existing customers or not. And for the sake of this example, let's assume you're not going to grandfather existing customers. In that case, you're going to want to notify customers and give them months between announcing and actually implementing the price increase. I recommend 2 to 4 months, depending on how difficult it is to switch away from your product. So if you make it too short, people will feel trapped and they'll be angry. If you make it too long, then when the price hike does come, they'll have forgotten about it. You know, do the famous Netflix thing where you announce it a year in advance, everyone gets mad, and then a year later, everyone gets mad again when you actually raise prices. If you are going to grandfather in existing customers at their current price points, raising prices is pretty easy. You just go to your pricing page and you raise them for new customers. And you should probably let your existing customers know we have raised prices, but in loyalty to you, we haven't raised them on existing customers this time. Don't commit to never raising prices on these folks, but it's a lot easier if you're going to grandfather. And I'll talk a little more about that at the end of the video. But if you are not going to grandfather and you're going to raise it on everyone across the board, then I have 5 key things that you need to communicate in the email or blog post or whatever other announcement that you make to your existing customers. So let's walk through these points of what I would include in the email or the blog post. Number 1, set the stage for the value that your product offers. In other words, we've been around for a long time. We've become a trusted provider in this space, etc. Number 2, just call it out. We are changing our pricing. Let them know right up front what's happening. Number 3, provide a high-level justification about why you're changing pricing. So for example, we've added tons more value. We're in a completely different space than when we launched. We're expanding our features, etc. Number 4, this is an optional step. Offer more specifics about whom it impacts, when price increases will go into effect, etc., and provide more justification if you feel it's necessary. And finally, item number 5 is let people know to reach out with questions. Let them know your doors are open for questions, comments, and feedback. In almost all cases, the hardest part of raising prices is the emotional toll that it will take on you as a founder. It's getting over the hurdle of just mentally saying, I am going to raise prices. Because actually doing it technically usually isn't that hard. And lastly, as you're thinking about raising prices, you have to think about grandfathering or not. So in a perfect world, you would just raise prices on everyone. Because, for example, if you had a restaurant and you changed your prices, then anyone who shows up next week to get a burger and fries pays the same new price. But SaaS is subscription, so it's trickier. So you have to think about a couple reasons why you might want to grandfather existing customers into your existing prices. The first is if you're worried people might switch to your competition or just leave you altogether, if you're worried about thousands of customers who will write in angrily to your support people, or if you're worried that you'll damage your brand and your reputation. So how do you decide whether to grandfather or not? I'll tell you that in just a minute. I want to let you know about the companion podcast to this YouTube channel. It's called Startups for the Rest of Us. And I release 52 episodes a year, much like this YouTube channel. Startupsfortherestofus.com if you want to check it out. We're approaching episode 700. It's all about building, launching, and growing your SaaS company. I answer listener questions. I do solo adventures where I riff on a topic that should apply to you as an entrepreneur. And I interview founders who have been where you want to be. You can find Startups for the Rest of Us anywhere greater podcasts are served. So my recommendation for deciding whether to grandfather or not is to use what I call Rob's Rule of 10. Rob's Rule of 10 says if raising prices for existing customers will not grow your MRR by at least 10%, ideally more, it is rarely worth considering. Because the amount of headache, the support burden, the brand damage, the potential churn is so onerous that if you're only going to grow by a few percentage points, it's best just to grandfather those users in. And I'll be honest, in some places, I think I did a conference talk where I mentioned Rob's Rule of 15, and it's the same thing. And I've kind of gone back and forth between 10 and 15. It's somewhere in between those numbers. So 10 is an absolute minimum. And I think by the time you're going to grow your MRR by 15%, you should really think about not grandfathering and raising on everyone. And while raising your prices is the biggest lever that you can pull in SaaS, I talk to founders all the time who are worried that increasing their prices will blow up their entire business, and not in the good way that you're thinking about. If you want to hear more in-depth advice on this topic, including exact steps that I have founders think through when they're raising their prices, watch this video. I'll see you next time.